A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away.
Welcome to Panel Up, your monthly pop culture panel. I'm John Campbell.
And I am Mike Gorgoni.
Oh, Gorgoni, we didn't do one of these last month because we're so busy.
Well, you were busy off traveling to a galaxy far, far away, and I was busy doing other things.
You're busy doing stuff. Yes, I did. In the interim between our episodes, I was down in California at Galaxy's Edge, which is very appropriate for this episode. And I got to say, what we're talking about, I watched the last episode of this right after getting off of an actual spaceship. So, pretty cool. Yeah.
Let's brag a little more, John, huh?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's, you tell me how much. I did watch it on a hotel TV. So, I mean, it's
yeah.
But anyway, yes, we were talking about the Acolyte because a new Star Wars thing came out. So, I think we're contractually obligated to talk about it.
At least I believe so. We host a show called May the Panel Be With You. I feel like if we do not at least comment on it ad nauseum, we are doing ourselves a disservice.
When we sort of set up this format of doing these monthly, Panel Up episodes, we did sort of go like, and obviously if there's a Star Wars thing, we'll talk about that because, it is technically a Star Wars show. So,
yes. But for those listening, it might feel like a lifetime has passed since The Acolyte has ended. But I assure you, it has been less than a month since that show wrapped up.
Yeah. I know. It's crazy to think about that.
At least as of this episode's release.
Yes. Yeah. What are you talking about, guys? That was 2 years ago. Well, yes, if you're going back, you got us. But
hello, people from 2027.
Yeah, hope things are going real well. But that's we were just talking about that beforehand. That is sort of like with the way pop culture is these days. It's exhausting. It's exciting, but it's exhausting because so many big things come out one after another now that it does sort of feel like once one thing ends, you're just like, great, close the book on that, goes back on the shelf. What's next? What do you got for me next? Like, in the interim, I watched The Acolyte. I watched the last episode of The Acolyte. I was like, great. And then I immediately binged the first 5 episodes of Cobra Kai that they put out for the final season. And then the amount of stuff I've consumed in the less than 2 weeks since I watched that last episode is crazy.
And that's before we get into any, like, world events that may have drastically shifted our perceptions of reality.
Tony, I've left the real world a long time ago.
That's probably for the best, yes.
I've escaped into fantasy so long ago. Yes, let's talk about The Acolyte, which is a Star Wars thing, but is quite different than the Star Wars stuff we normally talk about on this show.
Yeah, The Acolyte is a show that was announced years ago, and the idea of it
was... I said no one knew it. Remember when they announced it? They're like, and then we're also doing a show called The Acolyte. What's that? Hey, you'll find out.
Yeah, well, that was sort of my point. Getting to that was that nobody knew what to expect of this show, even up until basically its release, which I thought was the most exciting thing about it. You could probably go back into our archives over on podbean.com/punchup and find all of our old episodes, and in any of those Star Wars things from the last 5 years, you'll probably hear me say, well, the thing that I'm most excited about coming up is The Acolyte, because I don't know what to expect from it. And that is a unique feeling in Disney-era Star Wars, I'll say.
Because everything is, that's one of the first questions, right? When they announce a Star Wars thing, it's like, okay, where is it set? How does this fit into the timeline as we know it? And this one was always vaguely. They always sort of said early. I don't think they said High Republic out the gate, did they?
Well, because High Republic, when this was first announced, wasn't really it wasn't as big of a push as it is now.
Right.
Due to podcast time travel, you won't have heard these episodes of May the Panel Be With You yet, but I think the comparison between the High Republic multimedia push and Shadows of the Empire is a very apt comparison in terms of how they're approaching a multimedia franchise, right? You're doing all of the bits without a central movie to sort of tie it all together. And this, while it doesn't feel like the central hub of the High Republic by any stretch, having consumed most of it myself, it does feel like yet another piece of this larger story they're telling.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting initiative where they're almost reverse engine. They're almost creating source material for then the others. You know, I mean, it's sort of like they're like reverse engineering. Marvel Comics and stuff like that has the comics to pull from. This is almost going like, what if we created this thing over here, and then we can slow roll that into the film and media stuff, as opposed to this being ancillary to the film and television stuff, the books and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how much we're going to see pulled from the High Republic stories that are being told through the novels and the comics necessarily.
I don't think direct adaptations, but like they're laying track that could get picked up. I mean, I think in some ways a little bit like the animated stuff too, right? Where it's sort of like they are putting things into the universe that can then get picked up by the other parts of the universe.
What they're doing is they're creating a unique pastiche that Star Wars has outside of the Rebel v. Empire basically setting. Mm-hmm. Star Wars itself is a setting, but there are like micro settings within that broader context. And Rebel v. Empire is what we have like firmly been living in forever, right? And the outliers to that are things like Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, but even that has a Sith Empire versus Republic vibe to it. And so the High Republic is really creating this aesthetic of there are galactic level conflicts going on. You've got things like the Nihil and the Drengir, and I could name a bunch of other proper nouns that you have no context for, John.
Hey man, there's bad guys and stuff.
Sure, but it is not this like direct battle of evil galactic empire versus plucky rebellion.
Yeah, someone's being oppressed, someone's rebelling against it, right? Like that's
the High Republic doesn't really deal with that, though this show more directly deals with it in a very interesting, twisted way.
It certainly does. I mean, I definitely think this is one of the more complex Star Wars stories, and specifically in terms of morality, which I know turns off some people. And that's fine if it does, as long as you're not a dick about it.
Sure, yeah. Some people come to Star Wars expecting this very clean-cut light versus darkness storytelling, and then they get really complainy, or at least they can be, when you start layering in levels of moral complexity, like you say.
Yeah. And like I said, that's fine. Just then don't watch it and move on.
Yeah, writing 2.5-hour essays about how this isn't Star Wars anymore, all you're doing is feeding into the hate machine.
Yeah, I mean that's the elephant in the room. Unfortunately, with all of Star Wars now, particularly this got it real bad, this show.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate thing now that it saddens me and it irks me and it sort of makes me just feel bad, right? That you're like, man, it doesn't matter now. Like all Star Wars, and more so than we've talked about this, more so than the fandom. There's plenty of toxicity in a lot of fandom, but it is so loud in Star Wars, and it really makes it hard to, because I want to engage. I want to be able to go on and see people talking about a thing I like and being like, yeah. And instead, it's just like with Star Wars, I know just to avoid anyone talking about it. I literally, when I was down in California, my Lyft driver was like, "All right, you coming back from the park?" I was going back to the airport. It's like, "You coming back from the park?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, you a big Star Wars fan?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Me too." And I was like, "Oh Christ, where?" He goes, "You watch Acolyte?" And I'm like, "Oh, where's this going? Where is it?" Luckily, he was all right, but it was sort of a thing where it's like, as soon as people bring up Star Wars, I'm almost just like, "Oh God, what are you gonna say?"
But I think in that particular instance, and in the quote-unquote real world in general,
if people are better than they are online,
absolutely 100% in my experience. You can be at a convention and something Star Warsy comes up and you start talking to people about Star Wars. There are going to be outliers. There are going to be people being like poo-pooing on things. There always are. But I would say the vast majority of people, you see a cool Star Wars thing, you go, yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, even if it isn't
Yeah.
transcendental of an experience, because it's just like Star Wars can't necessarily reach that height anymore because it is so ubiquitous.
Well, I this is always my thing to people because I was talking to our pal Jerry Chrisman, who's a huge Star Wars fan. As you know, he's been on the show a few times to talk about Star Wars. And he loved this show, and he was so bummed because he was trying and he was going like, I don't understand the vitriol. I think this is really good. And what I always boil this down to, and it's similar to the Indiana Jones backlash, which I always think this sort of thing where it's like when people talk about it, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. It's not capturing that magic. I always just go back to I think what you're reacting to. Some of these people, some of them are straight up racist, sexist. Putting that aside, but I think for some of the people who get bummed about this stuff and say, "Oh, it doesn't feel like it used to," you're not 8 years old anymore. And I really do feel like that's a lot of it is people just going like, "Why doesn't it make me feel like when it was a brand new thing and I was a kid?" And it's like, if you're chasing that, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I feel like people react to the Ghostbusters movies like that. I feel like a lot of the nostalgia stuff is just like it doesn't fully take me back to being a child again. And it's like, well, maybe you're engaging with it. Maybe you're asking an impossible thing of something.
Well, and you're asking this media property to strip away years of worldly cynicism that you have now on your psyche that like it could never do.
Yeah, you've got to meet it halfway, right? You've got to a little bit put that aside and then come at it, which I love to do. I mean, that's one of my. That's why I often do like all the nostalgic context. I'm like, yeah.
But I will say, going back straight to the Acolyte, is that this, of all the Star Wars things we've gotten in recent years, is not trying to capture any sort of nostalgia bait necessarily, outside of just being space wizards with laser swords.
There's a familiarity to just anytime anyone busts out a lightsaber, there's a certain nostalgia, right? Like it is just like, that's Star Wars. Like there's a look to Star Wars. Well, I swear I'm going to stop talking about it, but when I was down in the Disney World or in the Disneyland, not in the Disney World, and they had a display for the show because it was happening there.
Please, John, you were at Galaxy's Edge.
This was actually in Tomorrowland, but they had a whole display where they had all the lightsabers of all the characters from the Acolyte lit up in a big rainbow, and it was just very cool to see. And so yes, there is just sort of that visceral aesthetic that is Star Wars that makes you go ooh. Somebody lights up a lightsaber. There's always going to be the little 8-year-old part of me that's going to be like ooh, a lightsaber. And also somebody uses a lightsaber in one of the coolest ways ever in this show. So,
well, and it can even be as simple as I just saw a video on Instagram this morning of Ray Park at a gym somewhere. Somebody handed him a lightsaber and he started going hog wild with it.
Oh,
and that just makes me go, oh yes, there is still good in the world.
Yep, they're just I mean, this show definitely has some of the visceral pleasures, but this is more in the vein of Andor. It's a different thing, but in that vein of this is a mature story that's going to talk about difficult issues. And I think it speaks to, I was just listening to an interview with Dave Filoni, where he was talking about, he goes, I think it's great that you can get all these flavors of stories within this world. Why, he said the biggest lesson he learned from George Lucas was don't get bogged down in what Star Wars is. Keep pushing the edges of what a Star Wars story can be.
Right. A lot of people forget that George Lucas was so involved, kind of not necessarily on a day-to-day level, but definitely on a like top-line writing level with the original series, The Clone Wars. Like all of those seasons that premiered on Cartoon Network before Star Wars came back with the Disney buyout. Like that was George like pitching ideas, and some of them are fucking weird.
And I think it speaks to one of the things that I appreciate about the prequels, even though I think we're both on the record of being positive about those movies, but recognizing that they're deeply flawed.
Yeah, they're auteur movies that are like inherently held back by the singular creative voice at their center who was never told no.
That's very true, but I think the thing I will say that I respect about them, that is that auteur thing you're talking about, that I think gives me a little bit more love for them than the sequels, is George was trying to do something way different. Yeah. He completely flipped the script on what Star Wars looked like, felt like, everything. Those are totally different movies then. So I'll give him that. He one guy who did not want the franchise to stagnate was Lucas.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very interesting when people who claim to go back to Lucas, to them it's somehow like revert back to what's been done before, when that was totally the opposite. I mean, you've heard about the shit he wanted to do when he was imagining the sequels. I'm not sure it would have been good, but it would have been very different.
Well, and one of our complaints about those sequels is this kind of feeling that they're written by committee, right?
And they are written in a way that feels like it's trying to respond to the "what does Star Wars feel like" movement. And the one that doesn't is the one people got all bent out of shape about.
Well, I think people got bent out of shape about Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, but that's because Rise of Skywalker was trying to react to people getting bent out of shape about The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Last Jedi is an amazing movie, and unfortunately, it's just been...
Anyway, but all that said, like, The Acolyte has gotten a lot of undue criticism for a plethora of reasons, as so many things in Star Wars do these days. Yep. We're going to try to come at it from a more tempered perspective. I think generally both you and I were pretty keen on this show.
Oh, definitely.
But I can still, like, I think there are some valid criticisms of this show. I think the idea, like, a lot of the insane criticisms, again, you've been harping on for weeks now, the whole fire and space thing. It is absurd.
Well, it is the reason I keep harping on it is because it is the perfect distillation of an absolute nonsense criticism. It is absolutely worth no one's time to discuss it. It not only is it invalid, it has nothing to do with anything. Even if there wasn't context for fire and space in Star Wars, it still means fucking nothing when it comes to, you know, storytelling, character way, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, man, to get lost in that, I'm like, they inadvertently encapsulated their own, uselessness with that. I
think the thing that exemplified that or the criticism that exemplified that for me was people saying that them changing Ki-Adi-Mundi's age invalidates lore in some way.
Yes, that's right.
Like, you're taking a supposition people have made about a character who has 2 lines in the whole prequel trilogy, and suddenly that's the hill you're gonna die on, is that he's older than we thought he was.
Yeah. That's it. It's like the whole thing falls apart then, man.
Yeah, no, it's silly and ridiculous, and like really goes to show the lengths to which these, let's call them what they are, grifters, will go to gin up controversy at every turn just so they can continue this cycle of rage bait videos.
That's another thing I was thinking about too when you were talking about people at conventions and stuff. When you talk to people one-on-one, there's also no money to be made with those opinions, so that's another thing too, right? Is there definitely is a culture to that, and when you, much like politics, unfortunately, when you hear the same talking points, it's like, did you guys all get together and decide this is what we'll say? Because you're all saying it. You're not only making the same points, you're saying it in the exact same way.
Yeah. So let's put that aside. Let's talk about this show. I really enjoyed it. I can get really nitpicky about like how. Did you rewatch it at all after, or did you watch it just week to week?
No, I just did it week to week, so I've only seen it through once.
Okay. I rewatched it at once it was done, because we usually put off these recordings until like a week out from when the show is done to give people a chance to watch it.
Yep. So you watched it week to week and then watched the whole thing through?
Yep.
Okay.
I think this is a much better show watched all together.
That would make sense to me.
The pacing of this show did not feel good to me at the time, week to week. I feel like the pacing of it was my biggest problem. Is it feels a little like stilted. Where when and how they chose to end episodes felt strange to me at times.
It did feel the most like a long thing that had been chopped up of any of the Star Wars shows, which is not. I mean, let's say I'm pretty used to that in modern television, though. So I guess that didn't hit me. Like a lot of modern TV feels that way to me. Like and I've seen people their whole thought process about this, about like, does modern TV even know how to craft an episode anymore? And it does sort of feel like, no, a lot of shows just kind of go until they stop. There's a lot of stuff I watch that's just like, oh, that was okay, I guess I'll come back next week.
And I've seen this complaint levied at basically every Star Wars show at this point. I think The Mandalorian is the best at crafting like singular one-off episodes. I think Andor, for all of its like greatness, really needs to be consumed in those like arc chunks, because those are like 1.5 hour movies that they then split into 3 episodes. And this feels like a 3.5 hour movie that they chopped up into, what is it, 8 episodes?
Yes, it is. And it's an interesting thing because I heard, of course, the second the show was over, you've got the think pieces, obviously, and you've got AV Club, who I used to be a bigger fan of, I'll just say, of their writing. Because all the cool people left. No, that's there's a reason that all
follow the authors, not the website, yeah.
Yeah. It's the thing about there's a reason that most of the blank check guests are former AV Club writers, including David Sims. I just think it's interesting. Anyway, though, their big thing was biggest mistake was making this a show. This should have been a movie.
Again, calling it a mistake, like, I don't know. Having watched it all back to back,
been a good movie? I'm sure it would have been. But I think it's really good at the runtime that it's at, too.
I stand by my statement that the flow of the show feels better when you sit down and watch it back to back.
So maybe it's not a question of it should have been a movie. Maybe it should have come out Netflix style all at once.
Yeah, that would have been, I think, a lot better. Obviously, the drawback to that is you don't stay in the public consciousness as long when you do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
tell that to Stranger Things, though.
Tell that to Stranger Things, true.
It can happen. I don't know. Or even doing a thing like Amazon does, where it's like, we're going to put out 3 at once, or we're going to put these out and to count down to John mentioning the show Bosch. Bosch puts out 2 episodes at once, which I love. Every week I get 2 Bosch episodes.
Gotta have Bosch.
Yeah, well, I gotta have my Bosch, man. In fact, it's been a little while since the last season of Bosch. I'm jonesing.
Jonesing for your Bosch.
Well, I'm very happy because there's also not only am I getting a new season of Bosch, I'm also getting a Bosch spin-off. So I'm very happy.
You're such a middle-aged dad in terms of your viewership.
Oh, don't even get me started, because in November I'm getting James Patterson's Cross on Amazon, and I can't fucking wait.
But yeah,
I do think it's interesting, and what'll be interesting about this show's future is people who haven't seen it. From now on, that's the only way it will be consumed, of course.
Right. Yeah, and that's why the decision point to do however you release it is one that is interesting between the different streaming networks. We've talked about it 1,000 times, but the idea to release this show paced like it is on a week-to-week basis, I found slightly frustrating, and again, on rewatch, I found the show flowed way better.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I've seen this about a lot of stuff. One of the big things I hear a lot of people, and once again, get your bingo card out because John's going to mention Lost. But a lot of people who watch Lost now talk about, what are people talking about? Because they're watching it all as one gigantic story. And it moves a lot better than when you're waiting week to week between seasons. Everyone's speculating. You have everybody coming up with their guesses and stuff like that. Which I think that's another thing that has hurt Star Wars to a lot of extent is, my God, has anything been analyzed more than Star Wars? My God, the analysis, the expectations, the looking for clues, the amount of people who we'll get into. We haven't put our spoiler warning here, but the amount of people the amount of people, including that Lyft driver in California, was like, yeah, I guessed who the guy was. I knew it. You're like, cool. Was that a criticism? I don't. Yeah, I called it.
Yeah, and there was, especially in that, I guess, mild spoiler warning, and then we'll go full spoiler in a second here, but there was that one episode before the reveal where I texted you and, literally said, they're laying on a little thick, but I think this is the bad guy that we're about to get. And, look, just because the show doesn't shock me, I don't need some, red herring guiding me along by the nose just so the show can prove that it's smarter than me. And again,
about that too, watched
back to back, it flows just fine.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing. It's something I bring up a lot because people this is a big thing with the internet, and also we've talked about this before. The hive mind of the internet will guess everything because if you get enough people speculating, odds are somebody's going to be right just on a numbers game. If you suggest
Monkeys and typewriters, yeah.
right, exactly. It's exactly that. But it's a thing we've discussed before that is kind of irksome to me when people go like, "Yeah, I saw that comment." It's just like, I'm sorry. Is the point of storytelling surprise purely? Is that it? Is that the only thing? Is like, I didn't see that coming, because that way also when you do that, you end up with M. Night Shyamalan movies. Because
I was gonna say, did M. Night Shyamalan ruin storytelling for all of Hollywood?
he ruined storytelling for himself, no question. I just saw the trailer for that movie of his that he has coming out, Trap, and I'm going, that's a good trailer. It's like written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I won't be seeing it then because I know this is a great setup for a movie, but I know he's gonna blow it in the third act. He's just I won't get fooled again, man. And I love
John. On Old, they became old.
They did have a stupid twist in that movie too. Believe it or not. But or the last one was it the Knock at the Cabin or whatever. People who liked the book it was based on were like, I think he fundamentally misunderstood the point of that book. But yeah. Anyway, because he got his twist. But you know, it's an interesting thing where people do talk about that. We single out Shyamalan, but just in general, I don't like stuff that is. You see people, some writers try to do that, where it's like, it's what you're talking about, the red herrings and the pulling you along this direction. That's infuriating to me, maybe even more so than sort of having an obvious twist, is the idea about like, I'm going to fool you just because I'm going to obfuscate for the sake of it. And yes, I'm a Lost fan, and no, it didn't do that, and come at me.
Okay, well, let's... I want to put the full spoiler warning on here because I think that is a great segue to talking about
I wanted you to stop talking about Lost, and I'm like,
no. Well, yes, in general, but
we had an episode of Meet the Monsters the other week, or IP Scott, one of the ones I do with Brendan Jones, where he mistakenly poked the bear on that, and he shouldn't have.
But I think that's a good segue to what the twist of this show actually is, and how I really, really enjoyed it by the end. So full spoiler warning right here. If you haven't seen The Acolyte, I will say I recommend it. Go watch it. I think watching it all in like a couple of sittings is the preferable way to do it.
And it's pretty easy to do because they did break it up into, most of them are under 40 minutes even.
Yeah. So that being said,
yes,
the reversal... Starting now, the reversal of the May-Osha relationship as the show goes on and into the finale, I think is the twist of the show, right?
Yes, I do. Thank you for saying that, because I think the reveal of the character who's referred to in all the toys as the Stranger. Mm-hmm. And that's always my barometers. What is the
Smilo Ren.
Smilo Ren, as people started to call him.
Or Darth Bortles, I've also seen.
Darth Bortles is very funny.
Because he's played by Manny Jacinto, who was in The Good Place as Jason Mendoza.
Who's a fucking amazing actor. Just these two forms alone, the range on this dude is amazing. Incredible actor.
I mean, look, we'll talk about Lee Jung-jae as well, but like Manny Jacinto, I think is the MVP of this show.
Oh, that's a tough one. They're both incredible in it. I mean, everybody's great in it, but yeah, those two definitely stood out as like, whoa, these are next level performances. And Manny Jacinto, who I last saw get all of his lines cut in Top Gun Maverick. So,
oh man, I totally forgot he was in that movie.
Yeah, because he literally had all. I don't think on purpose, but just by circumstance, he was one of the pilots and ended up with all of his dialogue cut from it.
Yeah.
But the
May and Osha twist, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think the reveal of him, I think that's a twist, but I think acting like that's somehow what the whole thing hinges on. Not really, because his identity kind of doesn't matter. He's still a mystery by the end of the show, to some extent. And I like that. I like that they just started sprinkling a little hints of it, and somebody will write a fucking comic book or something, I know, at some point that'll explain everything, and that's fine. That's the nature of Star Wars.
But fingers crossed we get a season 2.
Yeah, that's another question I have. I don't know what their thought, because this doesn't feel as closed-ended as I expected it to.
It doesn't feel closed-ended at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the thought process here. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about like we have plans for season 2.
Well, and like we don't know what the barometer for success is on something like this, and like
Yeah.
obviously it got people talking. Is that the barometer for success? Is it like the fact that it has a low audience rating on IMDb? Is that the barometer for success? I have no idea.
But it's also the biggest streaming premiere ever on the service. So,
Yeah,
like, yeah, Acolyte was one. Yeah, they talk about Nielsen records show that I mean, it did huge numbers. So, and good reviews as well, which Star Wars doesn't always have. So,
right.
I don't know.
But yeah, the idea that the stranger, we'll just use the character name they gave us, is not the central twist of the show, right? The show is called The Acolyte. The fact that everyone wasn't focusing on, well, who's the Acolyte the whole time is what boggles my mind, especially out on the rewatch of just like, no, the story thread of the show is this like helix that you have with May and Osha and how they're winding around each other and the light and the dark side of the Force, right?
Right. And their turn with each other until eventually they're two sides of the same coin always, but they end up flipping which side they are. But
Yeah.
this whole concept that they're essentially two halves of one being, and so they kind of are destined to be opposed, right? And so even though they flip, as soon as one flips, the other one has to go the other way then, because it's just the nature of what they are.
Yeah.
One we could almost argue that there was it a Force dyad?
No, totally different thing. Anyway,
Whatever. I thought it was one of the stupidest things in Rise of Skywalker, and I thought this did a better version of a similar thing.
well, yes, this is what this show is doing, and what I really appreciated about it was that A, it's playing in an era of Star Wars we've never seen before. B, it's playing with concepts that have always been like stated as fact in Star Wars, but we haven't really played with the concepts of them. Right off the bat, we have a virgins in the Force. That's a line that Qui-Gon Jinn uses in Episode 1, and he makes a reference to finding a virgins in the Force, but the virgins is located in a person, implying that that is the unusual part about a virgins in the Force. And so we have that concept that's just been dangling there that I've never really seen played with at all. This idea of like a very Force powerful location or being.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have this idea of artificial life that is kind of honestly a central theme in Star Wars when taken as a whole in the franchise. Like the idea of cloning and trying to achieve a perfected version of that is like,
or even this idea that like Anakin is sort of this like platonic birth, right? Like
yeah.
not that he's but that there's something mysterious about his own origins, which then trickles down to Luke and Leia in a certain way, and then Rey.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing.
Hashtag Palpatine fucks. All right.
Hashtag Palpatine clones.
Yeah.
Project Necromancer, look into it.
Yeah.
But it's this larger concept that I think the show is tapping into and trying to explore. And people seemed, I don't want to say overly upset, but more not really grappling with the fact that this show is grappling with those ideas. They get so... People online get so wound up about minutia, about details, right, that trying to look at this holistically and like the philosophical story they're trying to tell here is really what got me like really keyed into the show. And everything with Master Soul is just so interesting. And yeah, Lee Jung-jae at the center of this show.
I don't know if, and it doesn't matter, but awards are whatever, but come on, that is an Emmy-worthy performance and a half, man. He just crushes. And I was not a Squid Game guy. I just missed the thing on it. I didn't really watch it.
It's good.
But I know that he's the guy from that, and I will say I was new to this actor, and he just blew me away in this. I am so excited to see what he's going to do next because, wow, is he good?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's necessarily a bad performance in this show. I think Amandla Stenberg, who plays May and Osha, I
Yep.
think she's fine. It's always hard to see actors act against themselves. I can never get
Oh,
over it. I don't know
I
what
was
it
really
is.
impressed with. I thought she really crafted two distinct characters that ebbed and flowed with each other by design. What's
Yeah.
interesting is that the child versions of them were played by actual twins.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Including one of them is the little girl that Santa's rescuing in the movie Violent Night.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. A movie
Nice.
we were big fans of here on the show.
It was good dumb fun in my opinion.
Yeah, and I can't wait for Violent Night too. Which I can only imagine is Siege on the North Pole, right? That's got to be where you revert, right?
I do not know. I cannot even predict what that
Well,
is.
I have some fan fiction. No, but I am available, Hollywood, or if you want me to write a
But yeah, this show's pretty stacked between even like some of the like secondary characters. I really fell in love with Charlie Barnett as Yord.
Yep.
Like the himbo Jedi was one of my favorite things.
One of the things I got to back this up to, and this will bring us back to the cast, though. I got to bring up Leslie Headland, who's a filmmaker I like quite a bit, who's the showrunner here, bringing several people from her show Russian Doll into this, including him. I don't know if you've watched Russian Doll, Gergoni.
That's one of those shows that like I missed the boat on.
Okay, I think you'd really like it because it's weird, timey-wimey, quantum
Sure.
physics stuff. But he was delightful in that. Also, Rebecca Henderson, who played
Vanestra. Yeah.
Vanestra, she was also in that show. So I'm glad to see her pull some of these people. But Leslie Edlin coming from the comedy world more so, she's like. Man, I don't even need to get into the vitriol for her. It's unwarranted, but she definitely comes from indie comedy and then that show into this. So she comes. It's kind of cool to see somebody come into Star Wars from a different background and bring in people who probably might not otherwise, including people like Manny Jacinto, who might not otherwise be on the radar of people who just exist in the sci-fi world.
Yeah, and Manny Jacinto again. Superlative performance, I think, throughout this show.
Yep.
Seeing him slowly drift into arch antagonist as the episodes went on was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Also, an actress who I'm a huge fan of is Jodie Turner-Smith, who has as a mother Anicia.
Anasea.
I didn't catch anyone's name. That's not true. I caught a couple people's names, but I was like, "Oh, thank God, Manny Jacinto never had a name." He did have a name, and I've seen some people refer to him by his imposter name, but I don't think that's really his name.
No, Kamir. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he is the stranger, and that's cool. It's cool to have a bad guy with no name. Yeah, and then of course we love Daphne Keene, X-23 is in here.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, episode 5 was the turning point of the show, right? Like, episode 5, when you had Manny Jacinto reveal as Sith Lord, question mark.
One of my favorite lines in the show, "You would call me Sith."
Yeah.
Like, that fucking rules. This guy doesn't align with that idea, but it's the only word you have for what I am. What a great line. He has two killer lines. The other one is Soul saying, "You murdered a child, and yet you brought her into battle."
Yeah. But, like, when he goes full berserker and just, like, half the characters we've been following thus far just get axed in one episode.
Yeah.
That was the make or break for this show, where I was like, okay, you had my interest, now you have my attention.
Well, it really did make you go like, okay, this is not a show that's built to be like, that's where I thought, like, maybe there isn't going to be a season 2 because we're killing everybody pretty much, and a lot of the cast is dead by the end of this season, to be fair.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. I think if there is a season 2, I think one of the interesting things to see, and they've done this with Star Wars, I don't know if we're going to get an Acolyte season 2, or whether or not we're getting another High Republic show that pulls on these threads. That's kind of the cool thing. I don't know that there may not be something called Acolyte season 2, but there may be a sequel to the Acolyte. There's a lot of threads to pick up. Some of those are with our main characters, but also I'm just so where this leaves the High Republic storyline at this point. I'm fascinated by and can't wait to see more of.
Was the sequel to this show not The Acolyte? It's The Apprentice.
There you
Well,
go.
hold on. We can't do that. That show's already actually. No, never mind.
Oh yeah. And it's not only is it a show, it's got some baggage.
It's got a little bit of baggage. Yeah, a show called The Apprentice might not go over well.
Yes, yeah. But something like that. I think that's a cool idea, and it's something we've seen them already be doing between the shared storylines of like Mandalorian and Ahsoka and stuff like that, where stuff is seeding other things. The idea of this feeling like this universe is really exciting, and
What I don't want is another show set in the same era, but then for 2 episodes it just becomes The Acolyte season 2, a la Book of Boba Fett.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. That's a weird way to do things. That being said, I still really like Book of Boba Fett, but
I've softened on Book of Boba Fett. I still think it becoming The Mandalorian for 2 episodes was
weird choice.
weird choice.
A weird choice. I still stand by. There's nothing bad in that show, except it's just the way things are presented is very strange.
Yeah. And the fact that it's kind of required watching going into Mandalorian season 3. Otherwise, the jump between season 2 and 3 makes almost no sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion to be had about shared universes. There's no question.
Yeah.
But this show, yeah, I said I do like that. There's this open-ended stuff, and of course there's some big cameos at the end.
Well, let's talk about some little cameos. You mentioned Rebecca Henderson earlier, and she's playing Venestra Rowe, who is one of only 2 characters that is attached to the larger High Republic story push, as it were. The other, of course, being Yoda, who is just 900 years old. He can be everywhere.
Who? I don't know him.
Oh, you don't know him? Little green guy. He's a little swamp goblin.
The little goblin on the swamp planet. Oh, I did not know this until right now. Rebecca Henderson, also the wife of Leslie Headland.
Oh, very cool. But
which I'm sure didn't cause anybody to say anything horrible online.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone was very cool and chill about the lesbian couple. Yeah.
Or just the idea of people putting their spouses in stuff that they already don't like.
Sure.
James Gunn. But
I was going to say, it's been working out pretty good for James Gunn.
Yeah. Well, and I would say it's working out here. I did not know that, and I think she's very good as Venestra in this.
Because Venestra is most of the High Republic stories that have been told thus far do not take place around this story. They take place 100 years before this.
And I do know her from what comics I've read and covers of other stuff. She definitely, she was the character I recognized in this for sure.
Yeah, and she's the only kind of connective tissue between those stories and this story. Yeah. So seeing her sort of become a more embittered character, because in those stories, she's definitely like young, up-and-comer, prodigy Jedi who is like, oh, she achieved the rank of knight at like 15 years old, and she gets these weird force visions every time she goes into hyperspace, and there's all this cool mystery around her, and she's got a lightsaber whip. And
dude, that's one of the coolest things, and I need more of it right now.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I know it's a little divisive.
Rip that bat creature in half.
Yeah,
that ruled.
But seeing her become this like central operative in a larger Jedi conspiracy made me, as the High Republic fan, go like, "Oh no, Venestra, the system broke you."
I was gonna say, because I definitely don't like this character by the end of this season.
No, it's sad.
Throwing Soul under the bus, man. Damn. Cold. Yeah, I was watching this just going, ooh, cold-blooded, man. Jeez.
Yeah.
Brutal. The ending of this is brutal.
And that's part of why I love this show, is it is painting the Jedi as an organization that has a fall coming, right? And I know that can rub people the wrong way because they want Jedis to be the consummate good guys, right? You want them to be the paladins that you remember Luke Skywalker as. And
there are plenty of them that are, no question. But as an organization, I don't want to draw any parallels to reality, but you can do it yourself. But as an organization, there are inherent flaws that even if there are many good individuals who are noble. And I think Soul is a perfect example of a guy who is at his core a good guy, but forced to do bad things by an unbreaking doctrine.
Yeah. an unyielding
Yielding is
doctrine that is forcing these people to make decisions with no gray area, right?
It's one of the biggest bummers to me about why Qui-Gon's only in one movie, because one of the reasons I love the character of Qui-Gon so much is there's a kernel of that in him, right? You already get the sense he's the guy kind of pushing back. He's the renegade Jedi by being sort of a hippie.
Yeah. And they explore a lot of that in the High Republic novels. I think the High Republic in general, like all of Star Wars, is basically a mixed bag. There's some really good stuff. There's some stuff. And
Read of it I've enjoyed. I certainly like the overall, like the overarching themes of it and stuff like that.
it does give us Matthew McConaughey in space, whose co-pilot is a large, unmoving rock, which is maybe my favorite addition to the franchise.
It's pretty cool.
It's Leox and Geode.
All right. They got a part for McConaughey in this thing.
I mean, he's just Matthew McConaughey is the character of Leox.
Well, I'm available. Let's talk. Thank you for allowing me to do that impression.
You're welcome. But seeing how the Acolyte is a story about like showing us the fragility of this system and how we can get to a guy like Palpatine who can like hit it precisely with one little tap and just break the whole thing, right?
The interesting thing about people who want to defend the Jedi in this way, that like, I don't want to see cracks in it. You're like, actually, it makes them worse to think that they were like great and just got broken all of a sudden. No, there would be a long lead up before Palpatine could come along and shatter them like that, right? If they were really all awesome and stuff like that, then they should have just kicked his ass.
Yeah, and look, they explore this a little bit in the Clone Wars. There's the whole arc with Ahsoka being like wrongfully accused in her whole fugitive era.
I mean, that stuff is great. That's some of the best stuff, right? And definitely gets big into that, right? The idea that, like, once again, as Ahsoka is such a purely heroic character who has no place in the Jedi Order as far as she's concerned at a certain point and has to leave. And a lot of our characters are like that, you know? I mean, a lot of our characters end up having to be that. Even what Luke is trying to bring back is an idealized, mythicized version of the Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, there are strong real-world parallels to pull between that attempt at recovering a Jedi Order that maybe never existed and like Japanese samurai culture, like pulling the whole Bushido code and like, did anyone actually live by this as strictly as you think they did in like 1300s Japan? Maybe not, who knows.
I don't know, man, those Kurosawa movies certainly.
Sure, but like, even in a European bent, like the whole like chivalrous knight idea of this like paragon, did that ever really exist?
Knight,
Who knows?
samurai, and then us are cowboys, right? Like, that's the thing about it. It's all basically kind of the same ideas. These were things that existed, but not quite in the way that we've made them out to be in pop culture.
Yeah, if Deadwood is to be believed, I think cowboys said cocksucker a lot more often than we think.
Sure as hell did, man. That I believe, 100%.
Sure.
But no, I think that's one of the things that, much like Andor in this, where Andor definitely sides with the rebels, but is like, yeah, but you got to get your hands dirty in a way that Luke and Leia were not going to.
Right. They were heroes, they were pinnacles, they were paragons, but the day-to-day grunt work of this thing looks like terrorism.
Right. And even if that show, there's no way to come out of that show not still feeling like, on a broad moral spectrum, we're doing the right thing. You know, I'm still with the rebels. You are going like, oh God, you're being forced to look at the ugliness of this. Whereas here, you're being like, I don't think this is still saying like the concept of the Jedi are bad, but they're saying like this, it has grown to such power. It has become so self-righteous that it's dooming itself. And that won't carry out for another, 100 or so years, right after this? It's about 100 years before episode 1 of this show. Yeah. But like the cracks are there. I mean, and they vocalize that, of course, in the finale, right? They literally is dialogue about like, you people are doomed.
Well, and that's why I think the whole performance between Amandla Stenberg and Manny Jacinto, the stranger, and specifically Osha, their back and forth in the back half of this show is so exemplifying. Like, the Sith are still bad guys, but the fact that you can even build any sympathy for these dark side users because they feel oppressed by a larger system that is telling them they're not allowed to live the way they want. The way they want is through like pure emotion, giving themselves over to all these like desires and a level of like power trip hedonism, right? Yeah.
They are murderers. He does murder a child. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what I love. That is what I love about this. Is like the Stranger reminds me a lot of Killmonger, who of course is still probably my favorite Marvel villain because it's like all your complaints are valid, but you can't kill everybody. Like that's just not okay. That's unacceptable behavior. Like it's the alternative isn't then mass slaughter.
Yeah.
And that I like that. I mean, that's all. And this is why Star Wars fans, including you and I, have talked the vaunted idea of the gray Jedi, right? Like the idea that the light side or the idea of being purely either side is fundamentally problematic.
Well, and it also kind of is refuted. I mean, you can quote George Lucas if you absolutely want, but this idea that the light side is a like structural imbalance just as much as the dark side is, I think is an inherent misunderstanding of sort of the spiritualism that went into the ideas behind the Force. And the idea is that like if you're in the light side, you are in a level of balance and able to like reciprocate the Force in a way, and the dark side is in itself imbalance.
Right. Yeah, it's the which is that makes a lot more sense. But sort of this idea, yes, that the prophecy is one will bring balance to the Force, not one will make the Force good.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so it is, yeah. But no, yeah. I'm not, and that's what I'm a little concerned at how much I was reading about like that in that scene where he's taking the bath in the water and stuff like that. People are not only like that body be banging,
which let's be clear, it is.
Well, he trained his ass off, as we know, for this thing. Jesus Christ, he molded himself into a weapon.
You can find videos of him doing some like fight choreography training, and like boy can move.
He goes hard, and I like that because it's like once again the body. It's an example of not only is the dude just jacked and it's pleasurable to look at for people, but like that fits his character. This is a man who has honed himself into a killing machine, and also but the idea of many people go like, oh, the sexual chemistry. Oh man, the romance between these two. I'm like, dude, he's like that whole scene gave me serious cult leader vibes, right? The way he's like manipulating her. That was really scary and toxic. So if the idea is you're like, oh, my, I'm just like, oh no, I was creeped out.
Well, look, internet people love a bad boy, and they think we can fix him.
Yeah. Speak to those Kylo and Rey shippers. Jesus Christ.
Again, is them kissing the biggest mistake that Rise of Skywalker made? No, but is it in the top 5? I think so.
Easily. And I believe was not in there until reshoots, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I heard. So, yeah. Not definitely a moment in a movie where I went, oh, okay. Which is not normal my reaction to people kissing in movies, but okay.
Right. So any kind of, at least like romantic chemistry between those two characters, for me, has an inherently predatory nature to it.
Absolutely, because I don't think this man has legitimate, like everything with him is a calculation, right?
Maybe, I don't know. It's tough to, again, we know so little about the Stranger. It's tough to say necessarily, because
he's pretty motivated in a certain direction.
If we take him at face value, though, he is a person who wants to revel in his own freedom, right? And whether or not he is acquiescing to some higher order or power, we still don't know. Obviously, there's the big Plagueis reveal in this show.
I saw a guy there in the shadows who was like, yes.
I have such mixed feelings about that. Because just within the context of the show, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. There's not enough of him to really know what he's up to there.
But I'm just saying, like, we never get a name drop about anyone named Plagueis. We don't have any real indication that the Stranger works for somebody else other than suppositions made by Vanestra.
Right.
we never get any indication that what he's doing on that weird island planet, again, I'm just going to stick with, I have theories about where that is in the galaxy, but the show itself just says unknown planet, so I'm going to leave that at face value as well.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, is he's another wild card, though. We don't see the stranger interact with him.
But that's what I'm saying, is in the show,
Yeah.
the stranger is just this wild card evildoer who is looking for an acolyte, right? And that's his whole motivation as far as we know.
Right.
So just having weird, creepy monster guy pop up in a cave, for me, I have all the context in the world, and I know the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
I seem to remember somebody mentioning something about that once.
But even if you've only seen the movies,
Yeah.
you have no idea who this like weird, creepy cave guy is supposed to be.
No, certainly not.
Other than weird, creepy cave guy, who was maybe there the whole time?
Well, that's the thing. I can't tell. Is he working for Darth Plagueis, or is Darth Plagueis just going like, "Oh yeah, I'm just watching from a distance, going, this is all going great."
Plagueis is just like, I like to watch.
Yeah, Daddy like. I thought that was weird when they had him say that. I thought that was not what I always imagined the character being.
Look, there's a reason Palpatine murked his ass. I'll just leave it at that.
Dude was a creep.
That's me saying that.
Yeah, he creeped me out. Imagine what he was like. Ugh. Yucky. You wouldn't have liked it, Vader. Trust me. No, so I have no idea where they're going with that. And Leslie Headland has been very much like, oh, we put that in there as a thread to maybe pick up someday in something.
Sure. I guess my point with it was, like, I love good little, like, nuggets of lore stuff like that in these shows because, look, they're doing it for guys like me, right?
No, I'd say it's very fan servicey. There's no question.
But the fan service stuff that I like is stuff that works within the context of the story you're telling. When they had his mask made of cortosis, the metal that disrupts lightsabers, I was like, oh my god, that's such a deep cut.
But it's also just so cool the way that when you see all the lightsabers start shorting out and stuff like that, and you're just like, that's awesome. It's just seeing a lightsaber not be able to turn on. You've never seen that like that. It's
Right.
just cool the way it's shorting out and sparking.
Or the whole idea of bleeding the lightsaber into a different color, like that's a deep lore cut at this point. It's never been shown on screen.
I mean, I've read enough comics and stuff that I know that's a thing. But yes, you're right. But seeing it happen and watching the blue blade turn red was like, I was sitting there going, "Oh man, that rules!" It's so good. It was so exciting to see that because and yes, I did have to. I don't think he will mind me mentioning this. I was talking to a friend of the show, Brendan Jones, about this, and he goes, "That's weird. Why did that happen?" I go, because the Kyber crystal bleeds. He's like, "That just happened." Yeah, it just happens.
Why do you think all the Sith blades are red?
Yeah, he was like, well, I thought you had to go find a different crystal. That was like, no, it's basically the evil from the person or the dark side, right? Corrupting the Kyber crystal inside of the saber.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we finally got it on screen was like, for me, it worked in the context of the story they were telling. It was a really cool visual.
Great visual piece of storytelling in addition to just being cool.
Yeah. But it also made me go squee because I knew what it was. Because, like, I've read that Darth Vader comic where he has to go do that.
Yeah, it's great. The Vader book is almost always rad as hell.
Yeah. Have you read the Pock stuff? The more recent Vader book?
That I haven't read any of yet.
It's way more decisive than the previous two runs. I like it because I think it does some really interesting things with, like, playing with what's left of Anakin inside of Vader and questions around that.
Yeah, I will read it at some point, but I mean, I devoured the other two, the Gillen and the Soul stuff. I love. I do know that there is not as much unanimous love for the Pock stuff, but I would
just say, if you were wondering what Keira Knightley was up to after those prequel trilogies,
I do know that was one of the plots. Yeah, is the handmaiden or whatever is, the she was the lookalike. Yeah, I always wondered. No, I didn't. I was always just more like, oh right, Keira Knightley's in that. That's like one of her first things. That's cool.
Yeah.
Now tell me what Rose Byrne is up to, because she's in episode 2 as one of the handmaidens. So
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
it's a lot of Australian people because they shot those in Australia, folks.
Right.
There's a lot of like future Australian movie stars in those prequels because they were around. That's why like Joel Edgerton's in there and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think the Yoda cameo was a little bit less. It was like, well, of course she's reporting to Yoda.
Yeah, and like throughout the show, we always get these drops of like, well, we need to tell the High Council, and the High Council is where Yoda and Jarl Poof and all those guys hang
Well,
out.
it's one of those things where you're gonna if you're in the High Republic, the only kind of I didn't expect a Plagueis play, but basically the only one you can kind of go to is like, yay, the big bring the house down is Yoda, and for it to be the very last image of the show.
And like technically, Chewbacca, I guess, would be alive at this point.
Oh, which brings me to one of my favorite things in this, which is Wookiee Jedi.
Kalnaka, yeah, Kalnaka's pretty dope.
Very dope, and played by the guy who plays Chewbacca.
He's just our go-to Wookiee actor, I think, at this point.
Well, because he's 6'11", according to his.
Yeah.
He also played the Scourge in the Willow TV show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but if you look at his acting career, it is all Chewbacca and then Kalnaka and the Scourge. These are his acting roles. And he's going to be doing something in Wednesday next season, apparently.
Probably gonna be Lurch.
I think. Well, unless maybe they're changing Lurches. Wait, did they have Lurch They had Lurch in the first season, didn't they?
Briefly, I think, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they've gone to somebody who's more of an actor or something. I don't know. I do know that there's an expansion for the Addams family in the second season. There's going to be more of them. So, but anyway, he's great, and I love that he just got he was the chosen successor. He was the acolyte.
Yeah, of Mayhew. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very nice.
Speaking of Kalnaka, I do want to get your take on the central conspiracy in this show. Now that we have it all unfolded for us,
yes.
What do you think of this idea of these, of the way they tell this story and the story that we're telling? Because we have this sort of Rashomon thing of getting the story from different angles and kind of learning the full truth as the show goes on.
Yeah. I like. It was kind of, this is not a criticism, as I was just saying that earlier, but like it's a little bit what I both thought it would be and what I was kind of hoping it would be, which is like it's a series of events that lead to tragedy. Mm-hmm. I like that that's the reveal, right? Is like key mistakes were made by several characters, and then it speaks to the total like moral right that the Jedi feel that they're in, that they would feel they had to cover that up. The idea that they made some mistakes and other people made some mistakes too, but the idea is they can't even be seen to be remotely complicit.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about her much, but Carrie-Anne Moss's character in Dara is kind of at the center of that, and she kind of pulls the trigger on making that decision, which I was so glad. She gets killed in the first episode. I'm so glad that she actually like comes back and has a important role to play in the story that's being told.
She was definitely the Janet Leigh and Psycho of this, right? The whole thing about like she's all over the promotion, she's front and center in the poster. We're like, oh fuck yeah, Trinity's gonna be a Jedi Master, and then for her to die in like the first 5 minutes, you're like, this show is not what I thought it was going to be.
But then when she comes back in later, when we're getting the reveals, we slowly unwind the whole story between her apprentice, and Sol and Kalnaka.
May's whole storyline is very classic revenge movie. I've got a list of people to check out, to cross off. Like that.
And then the whole question in the show basically boils down to, like, is she justified in that?
Still say no, but that's just because I don't think murder is,
Well, and because she doesn't have the whole story either, right?
Right. And she also is ignoring her own potential complicity in that to some extent, but also one of the things I love in this is, and this is and I said this about The Stranger, but just in general, like with the whole whatever sisterhood that is. Do we get a full name on what exactly they do? Because they're not their key is they're witches, but they're not night sisters. That's made expressly clear, which is good.
Right.
Be night sisters. They're bad news.
They're just like this cult of witches on Brendok. Like that's all we really know about them.
But that's the thing is like they seem relatively harmless from as far as we can tell. But like, let's say they're not. They're also not. They're not guilty in their own downfall as well too. That's what I like about it. I like that it's messy.
Yeah, the show is definitely not interested in giving you a clear dividing line between who is good and who is evil in that whole situation.
Yeah.
I would say whatever it is the witches are doing with the twin little girls is played as sinister.
Oh yeah.
So
no,
like
that shouldn't be.
There's a deep yawning hole in their compound that I felt like someone was going to get shoved down.
Yes, but they are not. Let me say they are not maybe the universal threat of things like the Night Sisters.
Night Sisters have zombies. That really makes it more clear cut.
That's what I mean. It's sort of like they're, but you know, because the whole idea is like, and that's what I like about it, right? It's sort of just like from May's perspective, it's like we were just peaceful people using the force powers for what we wanted to do, and they came and said we had to do it, but just like, yeah, but I don't know, they were kind of into some dark shit too, though, man. They maybe need to look into. They didn't all need to die, but maybe it was fine that they at least looked into like, what are you all doing over here? You know,
What's
it's like
creepy
also,
cult with only 2 kids doing over here.
Yeah, but also then the Jedi were too aggressive coming in there, and of course, and you know, and
and like it's probably very much. I think it's easy to say that Carrie-Anne Moss's character, Master Andara, did not intend to kill them all in one fell swoop.
Definitely not. I don't think that's the case. And you certainly get that sense from the most conflicted character, which is Master Soul, who's just like, I mean, clearly that there's not a day goes by he's not thinking about that.
Right, and he makes some very hard decisions about how to cope with that, and that includes continuing this chain of lies that eventually culminates in May and Osha's like dual upbringings, right?
Right, yeah.
When those two first meet each other again, and May is telling her like, "Oh no, you've been brainwashed by these people," our first instinct as viewers is going like, "No, the Jedi wouldn't brainwash people." But then by the end, the fact that that's true, essentially,
because once again, it's in this holier than thou doctrine that is the Jedi, where if we do it, I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal, right? But that sort of thing where it's like, well, if the Jedi have done it, the Jedi are good, so then it must be good, because every decision they make is the right decision.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that the messiness of the whole Brendock situation at the center of this story does make it so you can't have a clear cut.
Which is what I was hoping for, and figuring that was what was going to be the case, because this whole show is nothing but moral quandaries and like, oh, you sure you know exactly what you think about this? It's going to test all your preconceived notions, which I do get why that might irk some fans. That doesn't mean you start attacking people online, but like I understand some people do like Star Wars to be a fairy tale aimed at least at the child inside us all. And things like this or Andor are getting very complex and very adult. I'm not sure this show isn't inappropriate for kids, but much like Andor, I think it's another thing where it's like kids might be bored by it.
Because the story it's trying to tell and the questions it's trying to ask are not like, oh, you do what's right and that means we'll get a happy ending.
Right.
Because a lot of the characters in the show are doing what they think is right, but that comes at odds with what other people think is right.
Right. And we as an audience, when we're zoomed out to the full story, by the end of it, I don't know what's right. I know a few definite wrongs. I once again not on board with the stranger. I don't care how much he was wrong by the Jedi. You don't start murdering people like that. Not cool.
But John, did you see how sexy he was in that pool?
Yeah, he was shredded. Yeah.
There is definitely a moment when he's like coming out of that to confront Osha, when it's just like, oh, he's just swinging in the wind coming to talk to her. This is not cool.
It's a power move, man. That's a power move right there.
For sure.
Yeah. It's
yes, he did. Sweet Jackie, we knew her so little. Killed Daphne Keene,
and she was good. She wanted the best for people.
Her and Yord, man. Yeah. I'm part of the Yord horde. I'll admit it.
Yeah, I'm team Basil. I like
Oh,
Basil and his tracking abilities.
he's one of my like story nitpicks in the show because I just think it's a moment where they don't necessarily spell it out as much as they could have. The moment when he turns on Soul in the ship chase
Right.
was definitely just like, wait, why is he sabotaging the ship if
Yeah,
Soul's driving it?
I was a little confused when he did that.
On rewatch, it's like the scene is definitely played for, okay, Soul is starting to fray at the edges because of this situation getting out of his grasp a little bit, and there's this hesitant moment where he's about to open fire on May as she's fleeing,
Yeah.
and that's when Basil starts tearing wires out.
Yeah. Maybe more murder isn't the answer here, pal.
Well, but again, it's that dark side seeping in, and the unsurety about like if what I'm doing is right simply because I'm doing it for the furtherance of the Jedi
Yeah.
Order.
So what we're saying is Basil is the purest of the characters.
He's up there. He's up there for sure.
He's very much if you're looking for the cute plush toy from this show, Basil is your character.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely a character that when he shows up in what episode 3 or something, I was just like, oh, okay, I see where the toy is getting made now.
Too. I mean, it comes with the territory. Same thing with Pip, the little
The
personal.
Pip, that thing was made to be a toy. Yeah,
Yep. Oh yeah, and I've seen it. It's around.
I want the 1-to-1 scale Lego that it will eventually come out of the Pip
Oh
droid.
yeah. That's a given.
Yeah,
Because like with all this stuff, like all of the toys are coming out next month, obviously. Right? Like,
yeah.
and so yeah, you get all your stuff, folks.
One of my favorite Lego builds to come out of like expanded Star Wars universe stuff in recent years was the 1-to-1 scale BD-1 from
Yeah.
Jedi Fallen Order.
I have seen that around. That is very cool.
Yeah. But the whole idea behind the complexity of the event at the center of this narrative, I think is such a wonderful idea that Star Wars really hasn't explored before. This whole concept of the oppressive Jedi Order is
Yeah.
so interesting to me.
Well, and that storytelling structure that we're talking about is definitely something that the movie couldn't have pulled off in the same way, at least.
I mean, it can. We've seen movies that do that sort of thing.
We have,
Like,
but it would reframe the whole movie in a different way. Whereas here in a show, you can just go to the episode that flashes back and back to it. It's just a little bit cleaner structure. You could do it, but it would require, like I said, I don't know. It would have been it would be interesting to see that. But I don't have any issue with this being as long as it is. Number one, it's not that long, really.
it's really not. And again, I think watching it in 1 or 2 sittings is A, super simple because the episodes are pretty short, and B, I think cleans up a lot of the pacing and storytelling issues that I have.
There you go. I didn't feel, I mean, I just was sort of watching it, and I mean, aside from the only thing that really blipped on me was the endings did feel a little abrupt in some of the episodes. Was where I was feeling some of that. But there was a lot of people going like, "Oh, nothing happens on this. Nothing happens." And to which I'm almost, I guess maybe it speaks to this feels very in line with a lot of the quote unquote, and I don't because I'm not trying to sound pretend prestige television I watch. A lot of the dramas, whether it be like your Ozarks and stuff like that, are structured like this, and it's very telling that they got a woman who is a showrunner from one of those kind of shows to do this. So I think it may be an unusual pacing for Star Wars, but it's a pretty normal pacing for like streaming drama.
And I don't know what to ask of people who say that, because if it's just a matter of genre conventions, right? Because this is a slow burn mystery. That's what this show is dealing
Which
in.
I actually think that a similar Andor may have an even slower pacing.
Yeah, Andor is like fucking paced like Narcos. It's just this slow, winding crime spiral.
Andor was very familiar to me in its structure. Like, oh, right. Oh, this is the guy who wrote the Bourne Identity movies that runs this. Oh, this makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas this show is plotted like a season of True Detective, right?
Yes. Very much
so. Is it just the fact that there is a a thick layer of Star Wars smeared on top of this that makes people immediately think like, oh, well, if there isn't a pod race after 35 minutes, then what are we even doing here?
It's still, and this is actually something Jerry said to me, is because people still kind of expect the Flash Gordon, right? Which is a kernel of a piece of the influences George Lucas. The whiz bang, we're in a rocket ship, and oh no, pew pew pew. And there are moments of that here, but Star Wars doesn't just have to be that. And I think both of us would argue, and I think Disney's doing a great job of this, is in order for it to survive as a larger universe, it has to be more than that.
The hottest take I've been slammed for when discussing Star Wars online with people is always saying that the vast majority of the stuff Disney has put out has been good.
Oh, easily.
And the fact that that can even be considered a hot take is mildly depressing to me.
I agree, because, like, honestly, maybe two misses really in all, like, two objective, like, not good. I mean, really, truly, maybe just one thing I would say I actively disliked.
Yeah, and look, I can nitpick everything till the cows come home.
But we're talking about, like, just overall, like, thumbs down. I think really it is just Rise of Skywalker. I have generally been positive about everything else they have made.
And what that comes down to is the fact that they are trying to spread out and play in different genres. Yeah. Even something with as much universal acclaim as, like, The Mandalorian, honestly, people start to poo-poo it when it starts feeling too Star Wars-y, right?
Yeah.
When it starts leaning into lightsabers and Jedi stuff and Empire v. Rebellion.
People really
get to season 3.
Flip shit about the third season, which I'm like, really? Because this is the show they've been building to the whole time.
Right, but it's what the show started as was far more of a departure from Star Wars, right?
Yeah. I mean, it leaned into the Western influences, right? It's sort of like if you look at the soup that is Star Wars, if you start pulling stuff out, this show is definitely very Kurosawa, right? And then that's very Westerny. Andor is very, World War II kind of like
man on a mission sort of. Yeah,
that sort of thing. And so you start pulling these threads of it. And that's what's kind of cool. When you start spreading it out across the universe, you can go like, ooh, let's tap into that. But yes, one of the things I loved about The Acolyte, of course, and right from the trailers, I was like, ooh, this is a Star Wars mystery. This is a thriller. This is this is probably what Fincher's Star Wars would have looked like, which I don't know that it would have been great, but they did talk to Fincher for when they brought the franchise, when they were going to do episode 7. Fincher was one of those names, and I'm like, I'm
Can
basically
you imagine?
I know. I mean, his big selling point was he goes, I don't get final cut. I'm out.
Yeah, that's Fincher.
Yeah. And he's not going to fuck around. What? He's not going to take orders from it. He's Fincher. You can go make whatever.
What this reminded me of the most in terms of its genre conventions is like wushu, like, or how do you pronounce that?
I believe it's wuxia, right?
Wuxia, like dojo mysteries.
Yes.
Like, my master has been killed, I must avenge him, but there is a larger plot at hand that must also be addressed.
There's a lot of Asian cinema in this. Like I said, I mean, certainly there's always the Kurosawa sheen on the Jedi, and you even brought up Rashomon. A lot of structural stuff in here also feels like Kurosawa. But yeah, there's a strong, like, Chopsaki, Shaw Brothers, I must avenge my master, I must find the people, the House of Flying Daggers and stuff like that kind of. And the most, I mean, certainly another thing that throws me, because it's one of my other favorite things, I don't think I've ever really seen martial arts like this in Star Wars.
Oh, I was so happy to see. The fight choreography has been getting progressively better in these Star Wars shows. I thought it was really, really good in Ahsoka, but this was just a whole other level.
Well, I mean, we talked about one of the things that's amazing about Episode 5 is it's almost entirely just a battle that's starting and stopping and starting and stop. Like the whole second half of it is just lightsaber duels and people using the Force. But yeah, right from the beginning, that opening fight scene with Carrie-Anne Moss and May, you're like, okay, did Master Yun Wu Ping come in here, man? Because this is, I've never seen Star Wars like this, where and people are hitting each other and adding the Force to, martial arts moves. Oh, it's so cool.
We
I need
saw
more
a
of it.
glimpse of that in Ahsoka when Ezra showed back up, right? And he
Right,
was like,
yeah.
I don't need a lightsaber. And then it was like, oh, damn, boy doesn't need a lightsaber. And then
Which ruled. It,
but then we get all of that in this show.
it's so cool. And of course, the whole thing here about, you will be the acolyte or whatever, right? When you kill a Jedi without the lightsaber,
Or
without a
without a
weapon.
weapon. Yeah.
Yeah, without a weapon. And then
And
the reversal at the end, of course, that it's Osha that does that.
man, and the fact that it was implying that that's like a force choke, and I didn't see that until in the middle of when it was happening. I was like,
Yeah.
of course, kill without a weapon. How does Darth Vader kill most people he kills?
Yeah, dude loves to do that, man. He just show up at a certain point, though, right?
Well, when you can do it over like a conference call, yeah,
Ah,
you're showing off.
Yeah, that's really like, come on, man. Jesus Christ. That's a lot. Yeah, if I'm choking people over a Zoom call, we're
But
really.
yeah, every fight scene that Manny Jacinto was a part of was thrilling to watch. Just the way he can move, and the especially the fight scene in the last episode between him and Soul was just superlative.
Yes. Excellent stuff. I mean, and building to this, it does the great thing. I'm also such a huge fan of like grand tragedy, and that's what this ultimately is, right? All roads lead to this thing that's a twist, but it's also inevitable in a lot of ways. You're realizing this, you're dreading where it's going, but knowing where it has to go.
Well, that's the whole Anakin fall, right? Like that's at the center of Star Wars, is this idea of a guy who started good and then became the most evil.
Right. Yeah. He was the. I mean, it's the highlight of any act in those is that you're the chosen one, right? I mean, that whole thing from McGregor that's amazing of just the heartbreak.
You were my brother, Anakin.
Yeah, it's like, but it really is like he's saying like you were the best of us. You were supposed to be better than me, and look at what you've become and what I'm now forced to do.
Well, and that is my favorite part of the story in Ahsoka, is her personal grappling with all of that, of just like, I remember a good guy. How could he have become this?
Well,
and what does that say about me that he was teaching me?
That whole episode with her and Anakin is genius because it reframes everything, right? It's every shade of Anakin you ever saw, and he is all of those things.
But the fact that it doesn't diminish her,
Right.
was like part of her growth as a character. But
Yeah.
in the
It's
Acolyte, it's all about like those shades of darkness creeping into characters who think they have the moral high ground. And
Right.
like obviously the extreme of that is Anakin Skywalker, but we creep that back just a little bit, and suddenly you have Osha force choking Master Soul, and it feeling justified in the moment, but also like at what cost to her personal morality and her soul, even, to pardon the pun.
Oh, that's it exactly, right? Because it is sort of like whatever. It's what we're talking about with the stranger, but that's of course reflected in both May and Osha's journey, right? Is this idea about like, okay, you're wronged, right? But like, at what point have you, where does justice versus vengeance sort of take over, right? Like the whole idea about like something horrible happened to you. However, then you murder a bunch of people. Are you justified in doing that? I mean, it's classic revenge movie sort of stuff, right? Like, at what point do you become the monster? There are also, once again, real world parallels I don't want to bring up.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
But it's always an interesting debate and something that has always fascinated me. And one of the reasons I love the revenge or vigilante subgenre is that thing about like, where are the lines of morality within it?
So that being said, how do you feel about where we leave May at the end of the show specifically? Because obviously you have this character who's so driven by revenge and what she thinks is justice, but also the need for personal power, because let's not forget, she is trying to become the Acolyte. Like, that is her goal.
I almost look at her journey at the end of it as like she becomes the audience surrogate in a certain way, which is interesting because where she started. But right, once she widens out to this whole thing, she's kind of like, I don't know where I fit in this. What am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish? Right.
Well, because she has such a turn in episode 4 when she, like, her plan is to surrender to the Jedi.
Yeah.
And, like, no, we've gone too far.
Yeah, she's not as far gone as the stranger is. That guy's fucking gone. Whatever happened to that dude, whatever wrongs, which I'm sure were wrong, but something tells me he's way blown it out of proportion, whatever the Jedi did to him. Such a cool
And
also
maybe specifically Vanestra is.
I was going to say, 'cause I love that moment. She's like, oh, it's him.
We don't know what that means.
No, I know. I did. Once again, when the thing about this isn't Star Wars, that's Star Wars to me. Star Wars is nothing but little breadcrumbs and things like that. It's the reason you fans and everybody can invest so much into it, is because it does sort of leave you these tantalizing little clues. And like I said, I look forward to reading the novel about whatever their relationship was. You know.
In 1977, when Leia said, "You served with my father during the Clone Wars," and everyone went, "What the fuck is a Clone Wars?"
Oh man, I will say whatever I pictured as a kid was not what we got, but you know, it set your mind ablaze, right? Clone Wars, those two words together, what could that mean? So yeah, and that's why I do love that about that, and just and honestly, even the Obi-Wan Darth Vader stuff is so mysterious in that first movie, and even by the end of the trilogy, like you knew they were Jedi together, but you didn't know the full context of any of that, really.
No,
You
absolutely.
think about how little you really get in those three movies. It's pretty interesting.
But I guess most of my question was where we leave May. The whole mind erasure thing. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm still unpacking it to a certain
I don't know
extent.
where they're going with it. You know, like I don't know. I've seen a lot of people have a huge problem with it. I don't know. It's a thread to get picked up.
It's another one of those like force powers that sort of comes out of nowhere. That, like, logically, when you think about it, it makes sense that it could be possible, especially when you start like thinking about Jedi mind tricks and what that's like actually doing to someone's perception.
I'm a Superman fan, and he kissed a lady, and she forgot stuff one time. Like, you know. I don't know, man.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. Those movies love to make up powers.
You can just fly backwards around the planet a bunch of times. That'll make time go backwards, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Sure. That was a real. I'm a kid, and I just watched him do it. So it just happened. I don't know.
Yeah. If you go left fast enough, that'll make the planet go back in time.
I like that I do live in a world where that's totally valid to me, but then he kissed a woman and she forgot, and I was like, that's some bullshit. That wouldn't happen. The hell? Come on. Then now we're just being silly. I love that about like fantasy and sci-fi stuff. There are limits to it. I think that's a little bit too. Anytime people start to go with like the Force can't do that, I'm like, dude, the Force can do whatever they want. Remember people getting upset about Force projection in Last Jedi? I'm like, why not? I don't know. Is that great? Like, yeah. All the stuff it can do. It's the aliens in Indiana Jones also. I'm like, oh yeah, but the Ark of the Covenant was totally gone.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. The Holy Grail is real. People are tearing hearts out with magic, but fucking aliens? No way, man. Never. Not in a million years.
Yeah, you can have a literal immortal knight living in a cave for 2,000 years, but suddenly some things that look like space aliens show up, and everyone's bent out of shape.
Ridiculous. Now we're just being stupid. Yeah, like okay, whatever, man.
It's all made up.
Yeah, so I don't know. I imagine that there's some thought to that. I think there's meant to be sort of a hypocrisy to it as well, right?
Well, it's the idea that, like, okay, so a Sith would leave her alive and wipe her mind. Like, that's the price Osha needs the stranger to pay to get his acolyte.
Right.
But what do the Jedi do with someone who is culpable for all this crime but cannot remember it? Like, it introduces a whole other set of moral quandaries.
That's what I mean. I kind of want to see a fucking Jedi trial in the second season.
And that would have echoes of Ahsoka during the Clone Wars, right?
Even more so, though, because now you have somebody who actually is guilty but doesn't remember it.
But also is guilty of prosecuting justice, quote unquote, against a perceived wrong that Venestra
Yeah.
knows is wrong.
Which is in a moral gray area that should be discussed, but just won't be brought up at all because once again, the Jedi can't be wrong. There's lots of really interesting stuff. I think the High Republic, as you're talking about, there's good and bad within the stories of it, but it is such a great initiative because what a fascinating time, right? What a
Yeah.
time when the Jedi are on top. This is Jedi time, baby, and not great. As an organization, once again, there's plenty of Jedi here. I love so many of my favorite characters are Jedi. But the idea that institutions, because that's where the problems lie, right? That's always where the problems lie.
Well, and I think the more they explore this particular time period, the High Republic in decline era, I don't know if they're going to segment it that fiercely, but at a certain point you start moving away from High Republic and into the prequel era, whatever you want to call that.
Right. I mean, what for a while weren't they calling that the age of Republic, the age of the rebellion or whatever? Wasn't there a thing about that for a while? That was their initiative, and then I think they've reframed again.
Well, because you can get as granular as you want. That's just how history works, right? At what point does a republic become an empire? Is it when Emperor Palpatine declares himself emperor? Is it when the Senate is dissolved? At what point does any of this, you can get as granular as you want. And talk to any Roman historian and they can talk to you about that as well.
Yeah.
So at what point do we... Is it the birth of Qui-Gon Jinn demarcates the?
It is for me, man. I'm all
of the prequel
Qui-Gon.
era.
I do love Qui. He is one of my favorite characters, but yeah.
But the more you interrogate this particular era, the more it paints Yoda as kind of an ignorant bad guy, which I think is maybe a little bit of a problem.
It's an interesting debate, right? I don't know what I don't. Yeah, Yoda's a fascinating character, and I'm sure we'll get more Yoda stuff. Isn't there a Yoda comic?
There is, and what an interesting thing about the High Republic is how light of a touch they've used Yoda with. For the big chunk of the beginning, it was like, oh, Yoda's off doing some stuff. Don't worry about it.
I'm glad because I remember a time in Star Wars when Yoda would have been front and center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be curious to see, if this show gets a second season, do we go full puppet Yoda? I would love to see an all-new Yoda puppet.
I mean, that was one of the things that was so delightful about Last Jedi, right? Was that it was a full puppet Yoda.
Yeah, but, puppet technology has gotten to the point where, oh no, that puppet's going to look good.
Well, I mean, look at what they've done with Grogu, right? I mean, and the seamless blend of CG into puppet and vice versa has been amazing.
Yeah. Obviously, Disney on a whole has been doing some great work with that. I'm really excited to see what they do with the Thing as a character in the Fantastic Four movies for that precise reason. I think a good indicator of what direction they might go in is if you look at the Werewolf by Night Halloween special. The whole Man-Thing they had in that was a combination of practical puppetry and CGI that blended really well together.
That's always the thing I keep coming back to, right? When we talk about film technology and people talk about get rid of the CGI. No, don't get much like the Jedi. You need a balance of all of it, man. And we're finding that the best stuff does balance all of it, right? The stuff I'm most impressed by is stuff that can seamlessly blend. That's the art form. It's all these tools, and we're going to use all of them to create an illusion. I'm starting to get back to the basics of film here. Well, when people are talking about going to movies in fucking 4DX and the seats are moving and stuff, I'm starting to get into okay, maybe we need to back up and understand what this art form is.
Well, not going to lie, John, I was looking up the closest 4DX theater to go see Twisters in, so I might not be the guy to talk to about this.
It can only be improved from hot take here. It's seen it without because I did not care for it.
Oh, really?
Not a fan. Not a fan. I'm glad people enjoyed it. I did not. I had a bad time at the theater.
But John, were there Twisters?
There were. Yes, there is.
You got what you paid for.
Yes, there was a distinct scene where one Twister becomes two Twisters. So
okay, well then I don't know what you're complaining about.
Yeah. Also, spoiler for very few people who care. There's a Paul Scheer cameo that was the highlight of the movie to me.
Okay.
But there you go. There you got a little Twisters review. I didn't like it.
But we did like the Acolyte.
We very much liked the Acolyte. I thought it was great, and it made me very excited for something I've only sort of once again dipped a little bit of a toe in, which is the High Republic stuff. I'm on board for more of this. I think this is a really fascinating time. I think the themes that they're building into it are really interesting, and I thought this was once again another great example of proving Star Wars can be different tones and genres.
Yeah. I am generally a fan of all things Star Wars, so take this with a grain of salt. But I think the High Republic novels, a lot of them are really interesting in that they're exploring this idea of like the rigidity of structures and how they weather storms both politically and like logically. And there's a lot of interesting ideas to be plumbed in this particular era. And I think the Acolyte's another great addition to that larger palette of the High Republic.
Indeed. I think Star Wars is in a good place. We'll see. What's next for it? Maybe a bunch of movies.
I was going to say, isn't the next thing like on the horizon the Mandalorian movie?
I think there's going to be another Mandalorian season before the movie.
I don't know about that, John.
The Mandalorian.
Because they just started filming The Mandalorian and Grogu, like the movie.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. So I think that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Oh, thank you. Here's a. Excuse me as I Google, folks.
What does Dr. Internet have to say?
Favreau says he has completed the season 4 scripts. But
they began filming the movie.
Yeah, it's not clear whether Oh, I think the debate is if reports are to be believed, Mandalorian season 4 will be a shorter 6-episode season culminating in the film, apparently.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know. Are
they finally going to try to do the whole like release a show and then you have to go see the movie in theaters to wrap it up?
Yeah.
So many things have tried to do that over the years.
I think that's the idea.
Wasn't that like the original plan with Game of Thrones too?
That was the original. That was even the plan with Lost back in the day. I remember them talking about that. Yeah. I feel like Mandalorian is the one that kind of can successfully pull it off because number one, it's a TV show set in a universe that was originally movies, and I also feel like it's got the popularity that people will go see it.
So
But that movie
I guess before that though, we'll get Andor season 2.
Yes, that comes out next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're filming that, so.
And we've also got a couple of smaller things. I know this. You're not necessarily the audience for this, John, but the new Lego Star Wars special, the Rebuild the Galaxy, does look very fun.
I'm aggressively not the audience for that, but that's fine.
Look, they're giving us Darth Jar Jar. What more do you want?
You further proved why I'm not the audience for that thing. That's very funny and a meme for me. Supposedly, we're getting the new Jedi Order movie in 2026, which is the Rey movie.
But as far as we know, the script for that isn't even finished. There's like a story brief that Daisy Ridley saw. That's the last I heard of it.
They have a director and some idea of what it is at the very least. Sean Levy is making something.
Isn't he always?
That guy, that scamp. He's making a movie that is, I believe, right now called Untitled Sean Levy Star Wars movie.
Good for him.
Also supposedly going to come out in 2026. And then there's
Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, that's got to be next, right? Because we've seen pictures from that.
Why did I forget about Skeleton Crew? I've been seeing merch begin to drop for Skeleton Crew.
Really?
Like, it's out in the wild. It's not like for sale anywhere, but people have gotten their hands on it.
Yeah, that's got to be either end of this year or early next year, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Skeleton Crew with Jude Law. And that's John Watts, who did the Spider-Man movies, the MCU Spider-Man movies. They're saying it's going to be this year, so... Okay, so that will definitely be next. I'm excited for that. I love, number one, I'm a big John Watts fan.
Well, it's another case of, like, I don't know what to expect from this, so that excites me.
Yeah, it's sort of being pitched as like a Goonies kind of Amblin movie tone, which is once again a different thing, and that's what I like Star Wars experimenting.
Totally.
Supposedly Taika Waititi's still working on something, but that guy's like attached to 800 things. James Mangold is gonna write and direct Star Wars: Dawn of the Jedi. Although last comment I saw from him was he's also attached to do Swamp Thing over at DC, and he said which one will come first is which one he finishes the script for first. So
Oh, Mangold, you do you.
you do you, man. He's got a fucking awards baity Bob Dylan movie coming out at the end of this year. So
I saw the trailer for that recently, and
no.
as soon as the camera turned around, it was Chalamet. I'm like, all right, I know what awards bait we're going for this year.
Well, Mangold also did Walk the Line. I'm like, okay, well, back to that. Okay, sure. And I love Mangold, but that maybe not as much my thing, that stuff. But anyway, so there's lots, as always, there's lots of Star Wars stuff. But I think Skeleton Crew and Mandalorian and Grogu are the only two that are like, and Andor. Those are definitively happening because cameras are filming things of those or have.
Those
Yeah.
are eminent.
Yeah, those are. But we're as far as most of the Star Wars movies, I think Rogue Squadron is still like technically on a slate somewhere. So
Oh, come on.
who knows? I mean, that's the thing about it. Like they announce stuff all the time. The amount of
Yeah.
people. I think last Ryan Johnson was asked, he goes, I don't think they've technically canceled my Star Wars trilogy, so that's there. But he's filming the new Knives Out mystery right now, and Poker Face season 2 is filming. So he's got his own little murder mystery universe going on over there.
I don't believe a project exists until I see a trailer for it.
Yeah, yeah. Even stills from the set, I'm still going, this could fall apart at any moment.
And we're in as of the recording of this, we're in the second day of Comic-Con, so who knows what trailers have dropped since we've even talked about this.
I don't know if there's going to be I don't know if there's going to be a Star Wars panel at Comic-Con. I don't think there's going to be like any kind of. I mean, obviously,
But even if there's no official event at Comic-Con, this is the
Right.
time to start dropping stuff.
they did announce that Bryce Dallas Howard is directed one of the Skeleton Crew episodes the other day. I saw that. So,
Good. She's great.
yeah, give her one of the movies. Jesus Christ.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think she's earned it at this point. She's proven she's pretty good. So yeah, we'll see. As always with Star Wars, unlike Marvel, where I'm like putting dates on a calendar, Star Wars I'm always like, let me know, folk. Star Wars, you get back. You have my people. You have your people. Call my people. We'll talk. In the meantime, Marvel and Star Trek have stuff that's like imminent.
Look, we will eventually feel a disturbance in the Force, and then we can put it on our radar.
Yep. Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, everything is up for grabs with them. I hope you enjoyed our discussion of the Acolyte. Of course, if you want more from us, all kinds of content we have over on our Podbean patron page, which is patron.podbean.com/punchup. There, I said you get cool exclusive bonus content, including early episodes of shows like Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters. Very early episodes. We're years ahead over there, actually, which is why sometimes we make references to stuff that came out long ago on supposedly new episodes. So you don't want to miss out on that conversation.
Hey, if you want to hang out with me over on Meet the Monsters, we're talking about the Underworld movies now, and you can get that over on our Patreon page.
That is absolutely true. You can also, Gargano, we have a new YouTube show, which is our Let's Play series, Punch Up Plays, which is you and our good friend Elliot Lewis currently playing through the first Mass Effect game, right? Are you going to do the whole trilogy?
Our plan is to do the whole trilogy. We're making our way through the first Mass Effect game. We'll see how we're feeling at the end of that game. Though I will say, spoiler alert, those 3 games bleed pretty seamlessly into each other.
They do. That wouldn't be very hard to do that.
No, and we're playing on the Legendary Edition, so literally when you open the game, it is, hey, here's all 3 right here.
There you go. Makes it very easy then. And I think we talked about maybe doing some Star Wars video game content at some point, maybe?
Yeah, look, I've been eyeballing Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. Those are 2 games that I love dearly, so we will maybe talk about some High Republic stuff in regards to the video game if we get to Jedi Survivor.
Very nice. So yeah, lots of stuff on there. So make sure you head over to our page. Once again, that's patron.podbean.com/punchup. But Gargoni, tell them where else they can get all kinds of awesome content from us.
Yeah, because you know that Punch Up Plays thing we were just talking about? That's over on our YouTube channel. I don't know what you're talking about, John, because that's youtube.com/@PunchUpEntertainment. There you can find all sorts of ways to watch these shows, including, like this, you can watch it in the video form there, or if you're with us every other week during May the Panel Be With You, you can read those comics along with us over on the YouTube page. In my opinion, best way to consume the show. While you're there, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications for so many things that drop on our channel. We might need to explore in the future a better way to organize all of those things. There's playlists there of all the individual shows, but if you're getting notifications, you're getting notifications from us every single day because we're releasing stuff nonstop.
Yeah, at least 5 days a week of each day, Monday through Friday, we have new content on the YouTube channel.
So yeah, come over there, hang out with us over there. Really love to hear from you. In the comments below, let us know, what do you think of the Acolyte? I know it's a divisive topic, and please keep it civil.
Always,
because
always asterisks, keep it civil.
We're all here to appreciate Star Wars. If you didn't like the Acolyte, I'd love to know why. What are your things you didn't vibe with? But
and if the words woke or DEI come into it, you can go ahead and feel free to keep that to yourself.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, but that is going to do it for this. By the way, next month on the show, I think we have already agreed to this. We're going to be talking about the Borderlands movie.
For better or for worse, yes, we are.
That'll be an interesting thing because that's another one where you're a big fan of it. I'm only vaguely familiar with it, so our reaction to that movie could be very different. I don't know.
Will this be another Aragon? We shall see.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting experience. But that's going to do it, I think, for this month's Panel Up. I'm John Campbell.
And that will always be Mike Gargoni.
Till next month, we're going to panel down.